Good morning, Twitch. It is 10 a.m. Saturday morning, time for a little bit of studio time. Hope everyone's having a good day today. Please let me know if there are any issues with the audio, because that always seems to be one of my biggest challenges is getting the audio to sound okay. But my testing seems to show it's going to be okay today. So I hope you're all having a good day. I'm down here in the studio. So the last few streams I've done some playtesting of how to host a dungeon. I just posted a big post of that to my Patreon for my patrons, and there's going to be a public release coming soon, a free version of the game for anybody who wants to play it, plus kind of a deluxe version that if you're not one of my Patreon supporters, you'll be able to buy. And so today I'm a little burned out, so I'm just kind of sitting down here in my studio with various projects surrounding me, taking a look at what I've been working on and deciding what to work on next. And it'll probably be a pretty chill process. So let's see what I've got on my art table right now. I'll zoom out a little. Let's see how's that. I think you can see that whole thing. So this is a test I did for some ideas for making dungeon maps. Streaming the dungeon maps, there's a lot of things that don't come through on a stream because you don't have super great resolution or focus with the camera I have. So I thought I'd try something a little bolder. And I'm pretty happy with how this turned out, especially for a test. I haven't decided if it's done. I think probably I want to do a bunch more work on it. Maybe I'll work on that today. But I tried some new things with this so that you can see the layers are brightly colored. For those, I used store-bought acrylic inks. And then for these heavy lines for the rooms, I used these pretty cheap paint pens. I think this box cost me $15, and it totally paid off. The pens are not the highest quality. As you can see, the caps like to come off, and the tips are already showing a little bit of wear and tear from being used once. But that's fine for what I'm using them for. Sometimes cheap materials can be as good as fancy ones, especially when you're just exploring and trying stuff out. And I really like these mushrooms. So that's a project that I've had on the back burner for a while. I've also got this. So my Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition group is playing Waterdeep Dragon Heist. So very minor spoilers to follow. But as part of Waterdeep Dragon Heist, you can end up getting a tavern as a reward. So being the crazy guy I was not entirely happy with the maps that the game gave me, so I made my own isometric drawings of the tavern. See if I can improve the focus a little bit here, because that's coming in really blurry. 1 second. I guess I can't really get any better than that. I don't know. The autofocus is really... Okay, I'm turning off the autofocus. I guess that's the best resolution I can get with these. So, how I made these is I scanned the maps that come in Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and then I took them in Microsoft PowerPoint. And in PowerPoint, you can take any image and you can 3D tilt it in whatever direction you want. So I tilted the maps and skewed them so that I got an isometric angle, and then I put another piece of paper over top and kind of traced. And so here's our tavern, and the upper floor, several abandoned rooms, And as you can see, I'm now shading it with just a very light wash of black ink, and eventually I'll add some color using watercolor. So that's been a fun project. And it's kind of, because the hard part is over, the drawing is over now, it's just kind of shading it. It's a very chill project to work on. What else we got here? This is kind of just my random stuff stack. So this is a dungeon map that I drew. My original plan for this was to use this for the cover of How to Host a Dungeon. So I'd have this, and then I'd have the How to Host a Dungeon logo and the name of the game. But it turns out it just doesn't look great. It's like the dungeon is a little bit the wrong scale, so your eye doesn't know whether to look at the name or the dungeon. So I won't use it for that. I made a couple photocopies of it experimenting. But I think I'll do a little more work on this and finish it up as a drawing anyway. And here we've got some various dungeon rooms I did last year. Some town tiles. Oh, this is the Magician Civilization illustrations for How to Host a Dungeon. So one of the civilizations in the game is a race of wizards who build a city and underground labyrinth. And so this is just some concept drawings. So actually, you can see. I hope I'm not making you seasick with all the zooming in and out. Come on, can you give me a better focus than that? If anybody out there knows a really good webcam for art streaming, let me know, because I think I have outgrown this one. So here, rather blurrily, you can see some different concepts for wizard, right? You've got your floating city wizards, your demon skull, as inspired by Kill 6 Billion Demons, which is a great webcomic and graphic novel you should check out. We've got you got your sort of Gandalf-y sword-wielding wizard, your robot brain in a jar, kind of a sorcerer guy. This is a dude in a robe with too many eyes. We got some deep elf concept drawings. I'm just going to stay zoomed out. Focus isn't really good enough to show this stuff off. Some more deep elf mines and some concept drawings. This was just to brainstorm the civilizations while I was drawing them. I'm a really visual thinker, so when I'm writing games, I also am almost always drawing pictures and doing layout. It's sometimes a real annoyance, actually, that I feel like I have to lay things out to understand how the parts of the game relate to each other. But that's my process, and that's a big part of doing any kind of creative activity, is figuring out what your process is. Here we got some dwarf ruins. You can't tell, but I spilled coffee on it there. Fortunately, I scanned it before I did that, so good thing there. Hi, Joshua. How are you doing today? Okay, so here is, the next thing I'm going to show you is kind of an interesting project that stalled, that I'll probably restart. I have only shown glimpses of this on Twitter and on stream because I kind of wanted it to be a surprise, but this picture, so I kind of created this picture of a strange landscape with a weird techno mage tower and some machinery on a floating island. We got a forest, some ancient carvings, cave. I was working on this in October to release around Christmas time, and the idea was I was going to make this into an advent calendar, and I probably still will. It's just I kind of stalled, so maybe next year. But the idea is you have this, and then you have little doors at various places that you open, one door per day for a month, maybe the Christmas month, but dungeons could be any month, so maybe I'll do it in July. I don't know. And each day there's a little surprise behind. So there's kind of a map of where the squares fall, and then I started some of the drawings. So we've got like a treasure room, a horrific monster, some adventurers fighting the horrific monster. So there's kind of a bit of a story. This I think will be really cool. The reason I stalled is I started not liking some of the pictures I was coming up with, and then I wasn't sure about the layout anymore, and I kind of just foundered, which happens in creative projects. But now that I'm looking at it, I realize actually I still like this, so I am going to finish this. I don't know when, but it's there. Yeah, why so tired, Joshua? Need some coffee? You know, speaking of coffee map, I do have a dungeon map that I did as a coffee-themed dungeon map that I did as a commission for someone that I spilled coffee on. There's actually a ring of coffee from where I put my cup down on it. But I liked it so much that I finished it up with that being part of the dungeon, and the person really liked it. So, happy accidents, as Bob Ross would say. Oh yeah, insomnia is the worst. I'm sorry that you have to deal with that. I occasionally had a bit of insomnia with my stomach problems, and it's just it's awful. Well, I hope you find some stuff that helps you sleep, or whatever's keeping you from sleeping passes, and you get a good rest. So, and here's just a stack of how to host a dungeon playtests. This was the last one I did. This is an empire playtest with a rat empire that tried to conquer the world. Oh yeah, this is my candy themed playtest. We've got the Big Rock Candy Mountain and the candy mines and the caramel forge. Let's see what this one looks like. Oh yeah, so here we've got some gems and some kind of dwarven power plant. Okay, that was an interesting one. I may, I might maybe turn one of these into a painting. That might be another project to work on. Here we have, looks like a wizard civilization playtest. Got some buried wizard buildings here. This was the crashed alien spaceship playtest. This is a lava river. So this one I actually did turn into a painting. I scanned this, blew it up, put it on a light table with a piece of paper over it, and then sort of traced it and elaborated on it. Here's a pretty old playtest. This one's just some flat layers. I've got a whole bunch of these. Oh, this one is... Oh, this was the Christmas playtest. So it's kind of gotten... The pages have gotten bobbled, but we've got... This one we had two dueling wizards. We had Santa and the Anti-Santa. We had a candy cane forest that got mined out a Christmas tree forest. An evil hag. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Alright, put those away somewhere. So I think what I'm going to do today, actually, is I'm going to do a little riffing on this theme. I'm not going to work on this. I think I'm going to make a new one. Huh. That looks like a cave with a gold vein in it. That's gold ink. In a well. Huh. I'm not sure I even remember why I was working on that one. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of chill out and go at whatever pace seems natural. Just be a little freeform today. The first thing I'm going to do, so I'm going to paint this with acrylic ink. Acrylics are great because they dry really fast, so you can paint and then do other stuff on top of it. I'm going to tape this down first. When you're working with inks and watercolors, the paper has a tendency to warp, and this will help to minimize the effect of the warping. what happens is when the paper gets wet, the fibers stretch and bend and the paper buckles and warps. But then when it dries out, the tape pulls it flat, and it will stay pretty flat for good after that. If you're ever doing watercolor work and using a lot of water, a trick I learned, I never went to art school, so I had to pick up all this stuff from the internet and other artists, is you take your piece of paper, you dip it in a sink or a tub full of water, and then you quickly tape it down and leave it overnight. And what happens is it warps, and then it pulls flat. And then after that, you can paint on it in watercolor, and it will not warp too much. A little bit, but not a lot. So, all right, I got a dungeon here. I think I'm just going to start out with some inks. I think I'm going to do a kind of a mushroom forest on this one, because I like how that turned out in my first one. So let's see. Use this. We may get messy today. Just a few drops of that magenta ink, and got some water here. And I'm going to grab this big fat brush. I'm going to thin this with a little bit of water. This may be a dungeon, this may be a mess, we'll see. And I'm going to do I used to be very afraid of bold colors, but I'm slowly learning how to overcome my fear. I think I need a little more water in here. I usually keep a bottle of water around my desk, just it's very handy for many purposes. What was I saying? In addition to being a dungeon geek, I'm also a bit of a geology buff. I grew up in a mining town, and there were always lots of geologists around. Just read a amazing science mystery geology book. It's called The Second Kind of Impossible by Steinhardt, Steinhardt, I think. Can't remember his first name off the top of my head. It is the story of how a group of scientists discovered a mineral from a meteorite impact, a mineral which had never been seen on Earth and was impossible according to the accepted rules of geology and to crystal geometry. So that's not cool. I don't know what is. So that was really neat, and there's lots of funky geology in there. Mind-blowing geology fact for you. In retrospect, maybe this is kind of obvious, but when I first read this, it totally freaked me out. Is on Earth there are a certain number of elements, minerals that are formed when those elements combine, and geologists study this. But the variation of minerals that can form is huge, like I guess practically infinite, and they're very determined by the situation under which they form, which means that on planets other than Earth, there will be minerals and whole geologies that are just completely unique, that bear no resemblance to Earth. Like Mars will literally have its whole own set of minerals. And that's just kind of mind-blowing and fascinating to me. So perhaps someday scientists will visit an asteroid and find deposits of impossible crystals. All right, back to the drawing. So I got a little yellow ink. I want to give this a little, I'm going to change the color. I want to make it a little, I'm going to put a little dash of orange ink in there and just kind of let those mix together. And I notice these inks dry so fast, I'm getting more streaks than I want, so I'm actually going to wet the page first. Hey, look at that. Nice. Yeah, I like that little orange streak. I'm not even going to mess with that anymore. I'm going to come down here and give this area a little bit more color, though. Oh, here. Got a little dark blue. I read an interview with the creators of Dwarf Fortress once too, who about their ambitions to completely simulate the geology of their world. Crazy, crazy ambition, but sometimes that's where creativity comes from, is from just really wanting to do something that is kind of crazy or impossible. Okay. So my goal at this stage of the drawing is just to put down some areas of color with a bit of variation, not too neat, and just kind of let things happen on the page. And then hopefully the dungeon I draw on top of it will build on those happy accidents and do something unique. Hopefully this will dry pretty quickly. I wonder what else. I have an idea here. What other colors do I have? Got a little bit of gold. How about actually here? I'm going to do a little splattering, I think. What have I got for... This is probably a pretty good brush for splattering. This is actually a pretty crappy brush that's not in the best shape, which makes it perfect for splattering. Not too perfectly or anything. Put a few lines in there just to make that look a little more 3D. Let's come up here too and put a roof on this, make this into a tunnel. I think I really should do like a Bob Ross of Dungeons stream sometime. Just like invite people to bring their pen and paper and let's make some dungeons together. Not that I can make any claim to be a master on the level of Bob Ross, but I can draw dungeons. I'm gonna do more mushrooms. I like how those turned out. All right, so I got my cheap acrylic paint pens. I don't even know what brand these are. It literally just says acrylic paint pens. Made in China. Mango and Lime Designs Limited. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna do another mushroom cave kind of behind. I'm gonna do a third one. Why not? Yeah, remember how I did these? That's the tricky part. Start with some red shapes to be our mushrooms. Let's try and get a few different sizes. Put smaller ones to the back, it'll look like the cave goes back there maybe. Okay. And then we'll use some white for the stalks. And then some dots. I love crappy, cheap art supplies and products. I love playing around with them and experimenting with them. But for some jobs, you want a good pen, and these Molotow paint pens. It took me a long time to find the sizes and colors that I like, but they are great. I use this white pen practically every day. And for smaller jobs, I use these white gel pens. What brand are these again? Oh, this is a Sakura. Yeah, Sakura gel pens. This one's yellow, actually, but I have a white one. They're pretty good, too. Okay. Now, outline those in black. I think I'll just use my black brush pen. I don't know if all this babbling on about pens is useful to anybody or not, but I hope so. Put a little shadow under each of these to make it look like the cap is really 3D. Another thing I'm liking about these pens is some paint pens, they really repel ink. So once you paint, you can't get ink anywhere near them. But these ones seem to play pretty well with the ink, so I'm pretty happy about that. Sorry for the poor camera quality. I don't know, maybe a couple of Patreon releases away. Right now I have no art supply budget at all and no streaming budget, but maybe as we get into spring I'll have some money, I can buy a better camera. The one I've got it's a great camera for streaming something other than art, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that's turning out. And then I'm just going to use a really fine pen for the bottoms. A trick with pen thickness is a thicker line looks 3D, right? If it's something that you could reach behind, a thicker line will give it more definition, and thinner lines for the smaller details. And I guess I'll just make the ground, put these little upside down V's here to make the ground look the same as this room, so it looks like this cavern has a spongy fungal floor. Some dots. Put a little shadow under some of these. Yeah, there we go. I like that. Alright, what next? I really want to do something with this lava cavern, but I'm not sure what to do. Well, maybe I'll think about that. Now I'm gonna give I kind of want the rock to be a little bit more busier. Give it some texture. What is this? Oh, haha. This track on my iPhone is called Climbing Everest Thing by I Don't Know. So I have no idea what this piece of music is. It sounds pretty cool. I must have picked it up somewhere and just not. All right, so I'm just gonna use this gel pen. I'm gonna give all this green rock a pattern, basically. Actually, turns out this is a sparkly gel pen. You probably can't tell on there, but it's got sparkles in it, which I've been actually incorporating sparkly textures into my art more and more. It's just kind of fun. And so with these, I'm just going to make some gentle curving lines, put a little curlicue or a circle in it wherever it feels like it'll fit. Yeah, this track has a cool vibe to it. Make these lines a little thicker, I think. And I like that the green almost fades into the background. Actually, when I put a shadow on it, it seems like you can see better what it looks like. That way, hopefully the texture won't, it'll stand out from the rooms. So the rooms will still look like negative space. And this patterned rock will just look like it's kind of turns into a color. think this must be magical rock. So in terrestrial geology, we have three kinds of rocks. Igneous rock, which comes from molten rock. Sedimentary, which is rocks that are broken down and laid down by glaciers or water and then compressed into stone. And metamorphic, which are rocks that are changed from their original sedimentary or igneous form by heat, pressure, natural forces. But in a dungeon world, might there not be magical metamorphic rock? Rock whose form is dictated by magical forces or even divine forces? Something to think about. We know that in Dungeons and Dragons, magic that can turn things into stone, i.e. flesh, that's a thing. So when a thump, something is turned to stone by magic, what kind of stone is that? How do you classify that, scientifically speaking? iTunes has given us some interesting tracks today. So this is a little obscure trivia for you. The theme song from a documentary about archaeology on the Silk Road from the 80s or 90s. The music is by Kitaro. In the documentary, it was a very historic occasion because a joint Japanese-Chinese expedition explored the Silk Road to investigate civilizations and cities that had once been there. This is was at the time and probably still is a touchy subject because the issue of who various peoples are and where they came from is a very touchy issue in China, Japan, Korea, even today. I mean, not unlike the United States. That is the case here too. And so it was quite a historic and interesting and somewhat charged occasion. But fascinating documentaries, if you ever get a chance to see them. Woe to the poor goblins who have to slave away in the Paisley mines. Yeah, I generally like how that's turning out. That's kind of neat. You know, my method here is just to make a shape like this curlicue and then let that shape tell me what the stuff around it should look like. So I just kind of do a variation on it. I remember coloring has sort of become a craze as a way of relaxing and getting out your creativity. Before that it was Zentangles, which is just kind of a method of doodling. And I know this because I read a bunch about Zentangles when I was writing the first version of How to Host a Dungeon, because writing instructions about how to draw is really hard. So I wanted to see how other people tackled it. Because it's not like, you know, rolling dice and consulting tables, which are very definitive activities. It's tricky to tell people how to draw something. The Silk Road documentary was, I think it was called literally The Silk Road. It's like multiple parts, like an 8-part or something. It's fascinating. I remember one episode in particular in which they were investigating a city in the deserts in, I want to say, northeastern or eastern China. And the ruins had not been very much investigated, and there were, because it's so dry there were graves in which they were finding people's remains that looked like, you know, like they were modern, like they were practically, you know, buried yesterday because they were preserved for so long. And this is a really interesting. This kind of blew my mind a bit. That episode of the documentary ends with, and these vanished people, no one knows where they came from or where they went. And a friend of mine who's a China expert who studied China said, no, actually those people are still there. The people in the town where they went for supplies before they went to the archaeological dig, those are the same people. It's just politically very touchy to admit that. And that is a situation that's still going on. And I say this not being a China expert, not necessarily understanding the complexities of the situation in China, but yeah. People get very worked up with questions of origins and how they relate to the people who live today and where they live and who should live there. Archaeology can be a surprisingly political field of study. Kansas. Yeah, Bjork. I definitely advise checking it out. I really enjoyed it when I watched it. It's pretty fascinating. I definitely went through a phase where I wanted nothing more in the world than to grow up to be an archaeologist. I think that was just after I wanted to grow up to be a geologist. And hey, now I make dungeons. I got both. That's literally the best job in the world. Yeah, I think that looks pretty neat. I think I'm gonna do something similar with some of the other layers. All right, well, this is an experiment, so I'm going to get a little experimental. Let's see. I've got a gold pen somewhere. Yeah. So this set of gel pens that I'm using, that I use for a lot of my gel pen stuff, this is a super cheap 100 gel pen set. I think it cost me 20 bucks, like every color you could possibly want. However, their metallics are not so great, so I have this Uniball metallic that I use for a lot of my gold. And gold and blue is a great combo. This may be too contrasty. I may be making a mistake here, but this is an experiment drawing, so I'm going to make this level a blue and gold geometric pattern. If only I had known when I was a teenager that being a professional dungeon maker was a possibility. I think it's amazing that there are now people in the world who literally dungeon master for a living. That is the best thing ever. I am in awe. But I get to spend a lot of time drawing dungeons and designing dungeon games, so I mean, I am just the luckiest in that regard. Get a different angle on this. It's starting to look like a maze. Alright, so my new headcanon is that the reason why minotaurs and mazes are associated is because in a fantasy world, there are certain minerals whose crystalline structures, like this one that I'm drawing here, are maze-like. And so they form natural mazes which can easily be expanded and repurposed into true labyrinths. Boy, I really need to write a book about fantasy geology sometime. Make sure you can see what I'm doing. One thing I like about the kind of the intersection between fine art and game art is the fine art world, which I have been known to criticize from time to time. One thing it's got going on is for someone to do something, if someone is an artist, for them to go into their studio and do something, mix certain materials together to try and get a particular effect that they have in their head or they're curious about, they don't really need any excuse for that. The fact that an artist wants to try it is reason enough for it to be art. And this does give rise to lots of pieces of art that make people say, if someone did that, I could have done that. That's, which can be fair criticism. But that spirit of experimentation, of not having to draw your maps on the grid or follow any set of rules, I really love. And so, for me, making dungeon maps is as a practical role in gaming, and is also just it's fine art. It's an art activity, and that leaves me free to just goof off and try whatever I want, like this, which you can't even see what I'm doing. Apologies for that. Now, one other thing that the fine art world, a perception it creates that I do not like, is that artists are strange, magical, otherworldly flowers who create these magical things that no normal person could care to create. I think everybody who has any desire to should be able to go into a studio or a set-aside corner of their house or their kitchen table and make whatever crazy thing their imagination is telling them they should try and make. And not worry about whether it's any good or anybody else cares about it, or anything like that. So, which I guess is part of the reason why I made Host a Dungeon, really. All right, let's zoom out a little bit and decide what we're gonna tackle next. You know what? I think I'm gonna take a 5-minute break. I'm gonna grab a piece of toast for my rumbling tummy, and then I'm gonna come right back. So I will not be gone long. So talks amongst yourselves while I'm gone. right, I am back with some espresso to keep me going or get me going. I guess you can't really say keep me going at 10 or 11 in the morning. So this is to help get me going. All right, so I kind of like the results I've gotten so far with this patterning in these dungeon layers. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to actually push my luck a little. Normally at this point I might kind of step back a little, but this is an experiment, so I'm gonna make a polka dot level, and I'm choosing this kind of frosty purple gel pen. Ooh, whoa, okay, so that's way darker than I thought. I should have tested that first. I don't want it that dark. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to smudge that out. And I'm going to draw a rim around it, like so. And I'm just going to make it into a room with a weird purple thing in it. Okay. So I want a purple color that's not too different from this shade of purple. So let's just try a few. Okay, that's like a really peachy pink. That's pretty dark. It's also really dark, boy. A little too pink. Am I going to find the color I need here? That is the question. That's almost reddish. Let's try this one. Ooh, that's a nice sparkly one. Not for this, but maybe for something else. Man, I'm really sorry the camera quality is so bad. It seems like it's worse today than usual. Like, can I get... If I put a little more light on it? Doesn't seem to do much. Alright, I can't seem to do much about it. Maybe, let's try, instead of a gel pen, okay, that's really dark. I've got a Sakura pen. That's the color I want. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna turn this track up because I like it a lot. Hope that's not too loud. So this is an LA-based street artist and DJ named Tewz, T-E-W-Z. This track is called Ancient, Ancient Astronauts? Ancient Astronauts. It's kind of trippy and weird. Tewz was a competitor on the fine art reality TV show Work of Art Season 2. Not a particularly successful competitor, unfortunately. He just didn't really have the reality TV 5 or something. Work of Art was a show. I like reality TV, some of it. I really enjoyed Work of Art. I watched it with my daughter, who was like 10, 12 at the time. Who is she is an amazing artist. She's better than me by a long shot. If she gives me permission, I'll share the link to her webcomic about demons in high school. But I won't do it unless she says I can, because she's shy sometimes. Anyway, we watched that together and we talked a lot about art. We really enjoyed that show. And I have been a fan of Tuz's music ever since. Also, on that show, as a competitor, was an artist named, who calls himself the Suck Lord, who makes cheap bootleg action figures. This is one of his Gay Empire action figures that I was really lucky to find thanks to my friend Eric, who runs Gamma Ray Games in Seattle. And I have another one of his action figures too, which is a superhero inspired by chow mein noodles. I don't, that's weird and goofy, and I just thought it was cool. Suck Lord has a Patreon, but this is the last month you can support it because he's shutting it down, at least temporarily, unfortunately, which bummed me out. But yeah. Oh, and I've got to show you this. It's the Suck Lord. His Star Wars is one of his inspirations. His persona is kind of this supervillain, like Boba Fett masked dude. I got this for supporting his Patreon, and he put a nice note on the back. Tony, thanks for the money. It just tickles me. So, this episode of the Bob Ross of Dungeons brought to you by the Super Suck Lord and reality television. Yeah, this dot pattern is way too bold. That's okay. This is a test. I don't know if you can tell, but the gel pen, the ink is really heavy, and so it's soaking into the page and then leaving a dark dot in the middle because the ink is kind of pooling in the middle after it soaks into the page. That looks pretty cool. I think it's because of the pink ink underneath is keeping the page from fully absorbing the gel ink. Those are the kind of fun things you discover sometimes when you're experimenting with different materials. I don't think purple polka dots are ever going to replace the famous Dyson Logos crosshatch. I'm not sure what kind of geological formation purple polka dots represents in a fantasy world. Sometimes in the real world you will find stones that are little round river pebbles embedded in another substance. So where little pebbles fell into mud and the mud formed into rock, it's called a conglomerate. So I don't know, maybe this is a fantastical conglomerate. I'm sorry, my furnace just turned on. I'm going to go turn that off because that is going to mess up the audio. All right, back in 2. Alright, that should turn itself off in about a minute and a half. Let's turn this sideways. Yeah, the dots are actually drying really light. That's cool. Actually, it's the perfect, turns out it's the perfect shade. Put some dots along this river here. I don't know if you can see, but we've got this river. We've got this dude with a fishing pole and a little hut, and some other dudes with spears. Maybe going to hunt the dragon up here. There's a little house along the river, bridge. Got some river folk happening in my dungeon. Not really feeling like adding a lot of details today. I just kind of want to add texture and color, and that's just all I have the mental energy for today. Which is fine. Sometimes you just chill and daydream. This is probably an appropriate time for me to make a plug for my Patreon. So, if you like my art, or if you're interested in my game, How to Host a Dungeon, consider supporting me on Patreon, or just visiting my Patreon page and seeing what's there at patreon.com/Tony Dowler, TonyDowler. Patrons on Patreon get early access to all How to Host a Dungeon content, exclusive artwork, non-exclusive artwork, occasional gifts and postcards in the mail, adventures and game supplements from time to time. It's really just an all-around awesome deal. And if you don't want to support me on Patreon, or can't support me on Patreon, follow me anyway and you can see what I'm up to. Just about everything I make gets released for free as well. And, oh, I smudged my dots. You see? Bad artist. Bad artist. I should have turned the page so I wouldn't smudge it. What else was I going to say? Or follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and you'll get updates on what I'm doing. That's it. That's my full plug. Now go. Tell your friends to support me on Patreon. No, that's okay. You don't have to support me on Patreon. Just hang out and do art. Okay, let's see. What's next? I got this kind of yellow zone down here. I drew some crystals in yellow gel pen, but they don't show. They're practically invisible. So sorry, I'm just looking around for some color inspiration. I wonder if I have some like yellow green, like maybe this. Let's see what this color looks like. It's like a green apple shade. Shoot, my dots! I keep smudging my dots. Damn it. I am a messy artist. I'm a little careless. That's if I were other than my lack of knowledge of professional techniques, I think my carelessness is my biggest handicap as an artist. I wonder what would happen if I took yellow highlighter on that paint. I have no idea. I think I'll give it a try. Keeping in my theme of talking about pens and cool pens, this is a Wexford liquid ink highlighter that I spotted at Bartell. As pens go, it has some notable weaknesses. The first one is the ink reservoir is tiny. And second, this tip has a tendency to pop out when you take the cap off. Its advantages are, so it's got a liquid ink reservoir and the ink comes out really liquid. Like you can paint with it, basically, if you want to. It leaves a really strong highlight. I love these pens. I use them a lot. I'm going to see, let's just try a little spot. Is that visible on screen? Can't see much. It actually has kind of a neat effect. Let's do a little more. Yeah, I'm going to kind of use this to tone this, so I'm going to kind of highlight underneath this underground river here, and I'm going to smudge it with my finger. It's not showing terribly much on camera, but I won't spend a ton of time on this. Another effect I like with these liquid ink highlighters, a little trick. So in a spot like this, you can see I've painted very roughly, and there's places where the white paper shows through. The highlighter, I'm betting, will come out really yellow on those spots, and it kind of creates a neat effect. So I'm just going to kind of smudge and increase the layering effect on this level of the underground. Yeah, I like what that's doing. Sometimes I don't know if this is a dungeon show or a drawing show. I guess it doesn't matter. Oh, this is more twos. This is Ghost Dance. The album is called Helix. And if you dig these kind of funky beats, I recommend you check it out. Also, I'm pretty sure Twos is not going to come down on me with a cease and desist letter for playing his music on stream. Alright. We'll take a little white now and just kind of give some of these rooms a little outline, make them stand out a little more as being spaces. So now I'm looking at this. What other things there are to do? So I've got this cave here outside this strange city. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with this. I kind of want to make it feel like a fantastic underground. I got this kind of forest up here. Oh, and another thing. When I taped this down, I tore the page here, taking the tape off. I was not careful enough. So that kind of disqualifies this ever being an art gallery piece. It's I'm going to do something up here, up at top by this city. I think maybe I'll texture this in. I'm toying with the idea of doing just cross-hatching. I don't know. Anyone on stream have any ideas? This is an interesting color. I don't think I've ever... Oh, that's like a bronze metallic. Wow, okay. Let's see what this one is. That's a darker version of the same. What's this? Sorry, but U2 is auto skip. Not that I don't like U2, it's just I never asked for that album and iTunes keeps downloading it onto my device, so I'm not cool with that. Now let's go with this. This is like a clear metallic orange. Interesting. Kind of give this a fractured texture. I think Twitch needs to make dungeon maps a tag. We need more people drawing dungeon maps on Twitch. Retweet if you agree. Yeah, I guess I'm okay with how this is going. Thank you, Bjork. Thank you for the retweet. We have just invented the Twitch retweet. I am not super hip in the music world, but I have a teenage daughter, which means I do occasionally get exposed to cool new music. Like this Janelle Monáe, which is pretty hip. Actually, you know, my daughter didn't introduce me to this. This was someone in my D&D group that was raving about Janelle Monáe, and I had to check it out. But my daughter is a big fan. Here, let's turn this map upside right again. Yeah, that gives it some texture. Let's. I'm going to come back down to this bottom. Actually, here's a thought. Let's. I have a few gel pen colors that I keep for they get a heavy use, like this beige, which I'm going to put it in here where the ink has not covered the paper, so that I'm just going to kind of fill that in. I think it'll just make this look a little fuller. I mean, it sort of really blends with the background, but I think it makes this section look a little more, I don't know, richer, more complete. Yeah, that adds a little color texture that I like. Let's keep it going around the city. Go upside down again. True story. When I was in college, my sophomore class went to Rome for a semester. Basically, I was able to pay tuition. I was able to get to Rome, and I had no money after that. And so I drew Michelangelo pictures, copied Michelangelo pictures on the sidewalk in chalk for change. I wasn't particularly good at it, but I made enough money to get food and beer, which is all I wanted at the time. But that was where I learned how to draw upside down, because when you do that, the art has to face the people walking by, not you. And so I got a lot of practice drawing upside down. I still want to do something with this bottom realm. Maybe, how does this... Actually, I'm going to keep using this tan gel pen, and I'm just going to kind of... Yeah, this doesn't work so great on this ink. I'm not going to continue with that. It's a poultry, and Mona Lisa was a man. I don't know. I feel like I'm just making a mess. Everything I try, I'm just not super happy with. They don't tell you how much of art is sitting around waiting for ideas. Okay. I'm not going to work on that. I'm going to do a little detail work now. Let's see if I can make this worth looking at for you all. I'm gonna so this is supposed to be a door to the dwarven city. And I'm just gonna kind of try and I'm gonna add some definition to it. I'm going a little abstract here. I'm not trying to make this realistic at all, as I'm just not, that's not where my brain is today. more. I'm just trying to add these big thick lines. I'm trying to add some smaller lines that just give a different level of detail. Make some visual interest. That was me just, that was me putting my elbow in a palette of wet acrylic ink. That was just about a disaster. So, advice to anybody watching this, do a better job of not leaving stuff sitting all over your table while you're working. I'm really bad for that. So keep watching the stream for my inevitable massive paint spill disaster. It will happen someday. But not today. Alright. I also have this kind of dwarven citadel here. Maybe I can make this look a little more spiky and imposing by adding some black highlights around the features here. It's actually kind of helpful looking at my art on the screen while I'm drawing it because it gives me a little bit of a different perspective. I can kind of see it the way you all are seeing it, which helps me see places where I could be doing something interesting. Yeah, this is starting to look a little more sinister. So I guess this, right, the dwarves, they have this big gate to their underground city, but they've also got this like citadel that sticks up above the ground. I don't know what this, like, maybe it's like a fortress that doesn't have any doors on the surface. I mean, I've done that in Dwarf Fortress. I've built a fortress where there are fortifications that have no entrance on the surface. So I guess that's what's going on here.